free from the mainstream, the studio machine. I want it my way. Indie Film Nation. I want it my way. Indie Film Nation. Going all the way. Indie Film Nation. You know it's gotta be Indie Film Nation.
Hi, this is Bruce Himmelblau with Indie Film Nation. We're here in Sundance talking with Nick Broomfield, writer and director of the film Ghosts, which is up for the World Dramatic Competition. Nick, can you tell me a little bit about the film?
Yeah, it was the first narrative film I've made in this particular style. I did a big feature film a few years ago with a enormous sized crew and a big Panavision camera on tracks and stuff, which I found I could not make the film I wanted to make that in working that way. So this was kind of an experiment to use the same kind of size crew that I'd used in making my documentaries, and at the same time make a feature film. So we actually had a crew of about 5 people, including a translator, because most of the film's in Chinese. And just one on camera, we shot on HD using a Sony 750, and we had one on sound. We used about 6 radio mics, and then I had someone on continuity with the script and so on, obviously myself. So it was a very small crew. We could all get in one car, and the actors, if you can call them that, were all non-actors. They were mainly illegal Chinese who had the experience, and they were, although there was a script, they were basically improvising the dialogue. I think if you're working with non-actors, you don't want to give them lines to say because it's difficult for them, and you need to cast people for who they are, basically, to play themselves. So it was a new adventure in a way, and it worked out very well. I was very pleased with the results, and I'm starting another film using the same kind of approach.
Well, this film could have easily been another documentary. Why did you choose to make it a narrative?
Well, I wanted to do a narrative film in my way, so I went into this intending to make a narrative film. I felt that the technology had changed enough that it would be possible to make a very intimate, powerful narrative film with a very, very small crew. And I think it's also good just to keep changing what you're doing. I think after you've worked in a particular style, and I've been working in the style in which I'm known, appearing in the film for like a long enough time for me to not be surprised by it anymore, it seemed a good time to try something different.
And your style of film, why did you choose more of a documentary film style for shooting it, or as opposed to, you mentioned tracks? Did you find it easier to working handheld?
Well, I've always worked handheld, yeah, and I think the dramatic film tradition has sort of come out of the theater, really. So you've got these big sets, you've got massive technology, which is kind of really redundant in my opinion. It sort of all comes out of the technology somehow of the 30s, these gigantic machines, and you try and make a film despite them. And I just think that with each big technological advance, films have changed. I mean, until you got mobile cameras, you couldn't have a cinema verite movement. And so the technology enabled that to happen. I think the advent of HD cameras with the incredible quality that there is now means you don't need 35 Panavision cameras that are gigantic, and I mean some people will swear by them, but I think that the film look will become very dated very soon. So I think this is an exciting move forward. I think it will bring new kinds of films.
And was it much of a challenge working with 2 languages?
Well, it's actually less of a challenge than you think, because I think as human beings, you kind of get a good sense of what's going on. I had a translator, but some of the Chinese spoke some English, and I would get sort of more or less simultaneous translation through an earpiece. So it was fine, actually. It actually forces you to make maybe a slightly more visual film than you would do. I mean, I think the trouble with a lot of films is that they are too language based. It's like you tell the story with the dialogue, as against using a visual medium for telling the story. So I think it's much, in a way, it's a very good exercise to visualize a scene, to think, well, actually, how can I represent this scene visually, rather than how do I get the dialogue in to tell the audience what the scene's about. So it's, in a way, it forces you to make a more cinematic film, which I think is a good thing.
I love that opening shot. How did you find the location, and how did you shoot it?
Well, the location was Morecambe Bay, which is where the tragedy happened. And we just filmed on Morecambe Bay. I think the more real you can, my tradition is coming from reality and trying to make, and being fascinated by real people, real things, and trying to make my films as real as possible. So in this film, I wanted to use the real locations and use the real people. Use Morecambe Bay, for example, which is where the tragedy happened, which has its own character and danger about it.
And how did you cast the film?
It was a long, very disorganized process because these people were all non-actors. And it was a real, you realize that there are real advantages of using actors because they actually want to do it. And they're going to not run off halfway through the film, and they're going to be. My main worry when we did finally cast it was, how do we make sure they don't piss off after the first week when we actually pay them some money? So, which I think is a problem, and also, I think non-actors aren't used to the amount of time wastage. Chinese, fortunately, are all amazing sleepers. They can go to sleep like that when they're waiting around. So they put in a lot of hours of sleeping. And it worked out very well. But, I Ching, for example, who's the lead, we found through the Chinese church in King's Cross, London, where there was a pastor, Pastor Lawrence, who helped Chinese immigrants who had immigration problems. So he introduced us to a number of his congregation, and I Ching was one of them. So it was very eclectic, the places we were going to.
You said you shot in HD. Which camera, and what did you edit on?
We shot on the Sony 750, and we cut on Final Cut Pro.
And how involved were you with the editing process?
Well, very. I have to confess that I used to cut all my films on film, physically. So I'm a antiquated Steenbeck man. But I obviously know how to cut very well, so I'm always in the editing room, and I think obviously you make a film in the editing room, so you can't not be there.
Was it hard to keep your hands off the editing decks?
Well, it was very easy actually, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing on a Final Cut Pro, and it would just destroy the film. So I tend to work with people who are very good technically. I worked actually with Peter Cristallis, who had cut a lot of Michael Winterbottom's films, who was actually fantastic to work with. He had quite strong opinions of his own, which was very interesting to work with. He would sometimes see things in a scene that I didn't see. So I think it was a good working combination, actually.
And what is next for Broomfield?
I'm doing a film about it's called The Battle for Haditha. It's a story which is very current at the moment, where 5 Marines have been charged with murder. And I'm using ex-Marines and Iraqis to tell the story in a very similar style to this film.
Is this your future direction then? More narrative type documentaries?
Well, certainly for the next film. I don't know about the future. I think, but I start that in March, so it's quite soon in the next month. And I'm excited by it, and I don't know necessarily what I'm going to do after that.
And how can our listeners, viewers, find more about ghosts?
They can get to it through my website, which is nickbroomfield.com, and there are lots of links. That's probably the best site to go to.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more in a series of podcasts from Sundance and Slamdance here on Indie Film Nation.
Indie Film